Hey folks, welcome back to the Change Physician Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Melissa Cady, and today's guest, who is Dr. Scott Parazynski. And Dr. Parazynski has a fascinating story. He is not broadcasting to us from outer space, although he could, which we will get into a little bit, given his history as an astronaut and having been inducted into the United States Astronaut Hall of Fame. But we're going to learn his physician journey and start way, way back at the beginning. But Scott, it's wonderful to have you on the Change Physician Podcast.
Great to be with you guys. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I think you just called me really old because you said way, way back. But it is true. It is true. It's many decades ago. But yeah,
I meant way, way back in distance, since we're recording this and you're in space right now.
Right, yeah.
Melissa's edited out the time delay from your capsule. But all right, so let's start there though. You were an astronaut, but you were also a physician.
Physician first, right.
Why did you go into medicine?
Well, I wanted to combine my two passions, my two long-range goals, which involved wanting to become a healer. My grandfather had been a physician. He actually died before I was born, sadly. I never got to meet him. But, there's always the family stories of what a wonderful person he was, and healthcare always was an attraction to me. I'm sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I'm gonna shut that
in
off.
outer space.
Yeah, Houston, we have a problem. But my father actually also worked on the Apollo program when I was very, very young. So I had a front row seat to those amazing voyages to the moon in the late 60s, early 70s. So every kid on the block wanted to become an astronaut. Most grew out of that ambition. I never did. And so it's always in the back of my head, hey, wouldn't it be awesome to get a chance to fly in space one day? And so I didn't speak about it very often because I thought people would think I was crazy, but I was always kind of working towards that goal of getting into the weightlessness of space. And so lo and behold, many years later, I found myself accepted to Stanford Medical School. I had gone to college there as well, and there's a NASA research center called the NASA Ames Research Center right down the street at Moffett Field, California. So I ended up working in a laboratory there while I was going to medical school, and I was able to kind of fuse the two interests of my life, medicine and physiology, along with the possibility of one day experiencing it myself. And so all the ducks lined up, and I was able to kind of combine those two passions. Became a physician astronaut ultimately in 1992, and had a great opportunity to fly on 5 space shuttle missions.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I want to kind of highlight a little bit, because that's very different than a lot of the physician stories that we have. Because we have people who went into medicine with intention. They're pretty goal driven. But you have this kind of combined path where you want to do medicine as well as be an astronaut. So I'm sure that must have affected not only your medical education, because you already said you were out there working at Moffett Field, but what about residency then? How did that change residency and that kind of training dynamic?
Well, great question, Kevin. Actually, my clinical passion, if I were to have followed that, it was actually in neurosurgery. I was fascinated by neurosurgery. I remember just being, having the time of my life during that clinical rotation in medical school. I had actually the residency applications on my desk. I had a letter from the chair of neurosurgery from my medical school, Stanford. I was, right about to send in an application for those residencies as well. But I realized if we ever needed a brain surgeon in space, it was a really, really bad day. And so I decided that clinically, the best preparation for me would be in emergency medicine and trauma. So that's kind of what I ended up doing. I made a decision that was sort of hedging my bets. It was something that I enjoyed doing. I enjoyed emergency medicine. And I knew that I would be content by doing that clinically if I never got the job from NASA. But yeah, it certainly shaped my decision making. I remember going for my internship interview at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, and talking to the the chair of the program, a very famous physician, Marshall Wolf, and he was really grilling me, and he said, "Well, what do you really want to do down the road?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure I want to tell you. I'm not sure you'd believe me." He said, "Well, you've got nothing to lose. If you don't tell me, I'm not going to accept you." And so I said, "Well, actually, my long range ambition is to become a physician astronaut and study human adaptation to space and figure out ways to keep people healthy in long duration space flight." And I got the job. It was, but I was actually pretty terrified initially when he was, kind of grilling me because I didn't think that he would take me seriously.
For those listening, I'm just curious, what's required time frame or components to become an astronaut in order to, reach the goals you started to do?
Well, so you need to have a skill set that's relevant to the space program. So, being a clinically trained physician is one thing, being a scientist is another, having some engineering skills, expeditionary skills. I'm a climber, and I've done all sorts of different types of kind of remote expeditions around the world. So, team activities, are relevant. But really what they're looking for are broadly trained scientists and engineers and physicians who can contribute to the long-range mission of NASA. So, I didn't become an astronaut and get stovepiped into just doing clinical medicine or medical research. You're tasked with doing spacewalks and robotics, and being a flight engineer on the shuttle was another thing I did on a couple of my missions, and conducting payloads in a lot of different scientific disciplines. So you're a generalist. And that was the fun part for me, is getting exposed to all these different fields of science and engineering. And every day was kind of a new learning experience and working with great people. Yeah. So it's a very diverse kind of pursuit, and you're not a deep subject matter expert in any one area, but you get exposed to lots of different really cool stuff.
Yeah, I would imagine it promotes and offers the opportunity for a lot of creativity. And so I'm curious what kind of experiences you had with being able to implement some creative aspects or inventions or whatnot.
Yeah, it's a very creative, inventive environment. And in fact, one of the things that I became a specialist at is what we call extravehicular activity, or EVA. It's a NASA word for spacewalking. And so think about it as, trying to do brain surgery in a fully pressurized Stay Puft Marshmallow suit. You've got to work against the gloves in the suit, and but you have got to do very delicate, precise, dexterous kinds of activities. And so developing tools and techniques and materials to work outside in the vacuum of space. So that was a very interesting environment to think about how to do that kind of work more efficiently, faster, with less fatigue. And so I spent a lot of time innovating in and around that space, and also developing ways to teach future astronauts how to spacewalk. And so that was really exciting. And then another initiative that I was very involved in is getting the space shuttle program back to flight after the tragedy that befell the Space Shuttle Columbia crew, STS-107. You may recall that they tragically were lost on their reentry. They had a piece of foam that had come off of the orange external tank and hit the wing of the space shuttle, preventing their safe return. And so we had to figure out ways to go out on spacewalks and basically patch together a space shuttle. And so we had to invent really high-tech caulk guns and all sorts of different ways to get to inaccessible parts of the space shuttle. And so that was an amazing kind of evolution, working with a brilliant team of engineers and scientists. So
it takes it to another level of being prepared. It's not like you can be like, well, I forgot this, we needed this, and go back and get it. So
yeah, you gotta figure it out with the stuff you got with you. Yeah, so you have to think really carefully what you're gonna put in your toolkit, so that you can have that Apollo 13 kind of moment where you can get the duct tape and the and the other piece parts and bundle it all together on the fly. Yeah.
There's so much here. We have we're pressed for time, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff I want to go into. But I want to take a step back because so you're in residency and you're doing emergency medicine, and I'm kind of fascinated then is how you're in medicine, then how all of a sudden you go into the space program. How did you do that? And I'm going to put the background for me is because I'm a military physician. I know a lot of astronauts have a military background, but I don't think you had a military background, and so in my ignorance, I'm like, oh, how are civilians getting involved in this program? And maybe the other listeners will be kind of curious too, because maybe someone else is interested in space, and because they weren't military or because they, didn't think this way. How does that process go for you entering NASA? Like, what did you have to do?
Yeah, so every 2 to 4 years, there's a selection. It's a nationwide selection. And of course, there are about half of the astronauts, 40 to 50% of the astronaut corps does have some military pedigree. It's not required. Typically, the test pilots from a military background, there's a very strong pathway for them. They have to apply through their parent service organization. So, if you're an Air Force guy, you'd apply through the Air Force, and they have a selection pre-screening, and the Navy and Army do the same thing. And then there are obviously a number of civilian applicants too that come from different scientific and engineering disciplines. And based on the needs of the program that particular year, you can get an interview or not. It all depends on who retired most recently, probably, and anticipating what's going to happen in the years to come. And so I was very fortunate. In 1992, they were looking to hire a number of physicians to start to think about doing research aboard the future International Space Station. So in my class, we had 4 physicians and 1 veterinarian. So it was a large class and a great year for life scientists. But in some years, they don't have any physicians at all. It all depends.
Yeah, and so fascinating because I hear that sounds to me like a very competitive match. So I'm like, oh, you have experiences with match, and you're trying to get into neurosurgery, which is competitive, and now you're going to apply to the NASA match. So
yeah, no, it's being at the right place at the right time, and I guess I attribute my success to being very, very relaxed during the interview process. So I was still in my residency training. I did my residency in Denver, and so I had another year and a half to go when I interviewed. And so I thought, there's no way in hell I'm going to get selected this time because I haven't finished my training. So I'll just go in and, this is great. I got an interview. I'll learn all about the process. And then the next time, hopefully I'll get an interview and they'll select me. So I was thrilled to get this chance to go down, and they had me at this all important interview as a number of astronauts and the center director and all these important people at the interview table. And I was just as relaxed as can be. I thought, I'm getting to know these people, and I'll see them in another 2 to 4 years, and maybe I'll get the job. So I think because of the fact that, I was just myself, and it was an engaging interview. They said, well, maybe this is a guy that we wouldn't mind spending, 6 months in a can with. So we'll give him the job. And so they hired me that first opportunity, which is great.
Wow. So how did your life look? What did it look like from that point on, as far as your commitment and time and whatnot?
Yeah. So great question. I thought I would have the opportunity to moonlight and, kind of keep my medical skills up, and, I'd be able to kind of juggle both medicine and the rigors of the program. But I found out within a few years, I was doing some moonlighting on weekends just to sort of keep my my stethoscope in the game, if you will. And it turned out that, medicine is evolving so rapidly, and it's a perishable skill unless you're reading the journal articles and have a lot of contact hours with patients. It got less and less comfortable for me. Mm-hmm. And so after a few years after my second child was born, I decided, this is something that I can't keep up. And so reluctantly, hung up my lab coat and for my spacesuit, I guess, and just focused on that. But it's a great preparation for what I ended up doing as an astronaut. It's the mindset, it's the teamwork, it's the clinical approach to finding a diagnosis. It's that inquisitiveness that really served me well. And of course, a medical degree is such a great tool for a lot of different careers. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a CEO of a tech startup company, and so I've built a team around some of my innovations, and all the things that I learned as a physician, working in multidisciplinary teams and being inquisitive have served me really, really well, even in my day job today.
Yeah.
It sounds, well, yeah, it makes perfect sense because that's what we do. We're supposed to diagnose a problem.
Yep.
And that's what our medical training is around, and generating a differential diagnosis and then putting forth, a hypothesis that you're going to treat and moving from that. So that seems ideal when you're in an environment that has lots of potential life-threatening problems in many different ways. And the other thought I was interested is when you were talking about, when Melissa asked about kind of the environment you were in, and you had to learn all these different skill sets, in some ways just doing rotations where we have to go into a new environment and learn a new skill set that we may not be comfortable with. It almost seems like physicians have an ideal background in a lot of ways to becoming an astronaut because of those particular thoughts.
Yeah, see one, do one, teach one. Yeah, it's the same sort of a thing. Yeah, it's absolutely. And think about how foreign the operating room is the first time you're going in there, or the first time you do a particular type of case. Same thing with spacewalking or robotics. You've got to. It's a committing thing. In the case of medicine, you're dealing with the lives of your patients, and the setting of space flight, it's you have a little bit more skin in the game, so to speak. But the same sort of attention to detail that you have to have, and it's exhilarating. Taking care of patients and being on the cutting edge of exploration are very similar.
I'm curious if there's been any physicians reaching out to you with a similar interest. Have there been people?
Yeah, all the time. And I was very fortunate to have some mentors, some physician astronauts who mentored me. And so, I think, I always try to pay it forward and try to help people who have the same aspiration. It's what's exciting, I think, today is that, we have SpaceX, we have Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, we have the potential to open up the heavens for many, many more people in the future. And so it's not just going to be a select limited number of people going up in space. We're going to create a lunar outpost, and we're going to be sending, dozens or hundreds of people to go work there in the not too distant future, I hope. And then, Elon Musk is talking about, colonizing Mars. And so, potentially thousands of people will be going there. And so the opportunities for physicians and healthcare providers to experience space is, it's going to go exponential. And I think that's really exciting.
So I'm curious, there's always something about a profession or a realm that people aren't familiar with, that you don't really understand it or appreciate certain things unless you're in it. Are there certain things in your realm that you might want people to know that, we wouldn't have any idea unless we're there?
Well, yeah, I mean, we could talk for hours on just how there's such a crazy out of body, experience just being in space. The views can't be captured in emulsion or digital. It's just the three-dimensionality of it, the intensity of the blues and the blacks of space. It's just it's overwhelming. But just to something more mundane that I think is maybe kind of interesting. It looks like it's a lot of fun living and working in space, and of course it is. I mean, you're floating there weightless. You can feel like an Olympic gymnast or Olympic diver doing these crazy aerobatic maneuvers, which is wild. But the overhead of working in space is actually quite a bit greater. So here in my I've got my I set down my LaCroix here, and it's going to be there when I finish this call and I can take a sip. But in space, if I had that in front of me and I jostled it, water would start, spewing out of the can. It would get in the avionics and things would short out. Really bad day. The other thing is I can't actually put anything down because it doesn't have any stiction or any way to hold it there. So I've got to Velcro it, gray tape it, or duct tape it down, put it under a bungee or put it into a locker. So things like, a simple repair or a simple meal require a lot of forethought. And if you lose track of your spoon, for example, that you use for having dinner, you're going to find it 2 days later in the cabin air cleaner, also known as the lost and found. So you have to, just the simple things like one of my cooler experiences in flight was flying with Senator John Glenn. And I was assigned to the flight, among other things, to look after the good senator and to conduct life science experiments with him. We had to draw gallons of his blood. And so just to draw blood, you put a roll of gray tape on a locker, and you get your IV catheters, your alcohol swab, your gauze, your Band-Aid, your sharps container, and a headlamp, and you got to have everything all lined out and get that set before you even get your patient, and that takes time because you got to get all these things from different lockers, and so just the forethought, and then your subject has to be restrained in some way so that he or she doesn't float off, and you've got to have your feet under foot loops or you're going to go floating off. So the physics of everything make things that you would think would be just a snap a lot more complex.
Yeah, it makes me, I always found it interesting listening to just the adaptations, not necessarily positive, but negative adaptations in the weightlessness arena of just even not being able to maintain muscle because you don't have that resistance, or potentially cataracts. I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but everything I've read is that there are certain impacts, whether it's a radiation exposure or it's a lack of resistance. Can you speak to that? Is it something, how do you guys work with that?
Yeah, no, there are a lot of things that, there's some short and long-term effects, I would say. So generically, the transition from Earth's one gravity to weightlessness, it's awesome. You just have a huge grin on your face. You're floating. The workload, the physical workload that your body has to do is a lot less. Your heart doesn't have to pump against gravity. Your muscles and bones don't have to resist gravity. So you're just sort of like on a float on top of the pool. So your body goes on holiday, and it's peaceful and beautiful. However, there are some other challenges. So your spine is straightening, and your discs are expanding. So there's a risk of disc herniation. And I actually had a lumbar disc that was likely due to my spaceflight experiences. There's a fluid shift that occurs early in spaceflight that gives you a runny nose and sometimes a mild headache in the first few days of spaceflight. There's space motion sickness, wherein your inner ear is no longer responding to the weight, the pull of gravity. So the otolith cells there don't have a true sense of the velocity or the gravity vector. And so, since the hair cells in there are just sort of floating around, it can be very provocative and cause nausea and vomiting for the first few days of spaceflight, unless you get some Phenergan on board. And then there's the deconditioning of our muscles and bones. So we have to exercise every day to come back to Earth's gravity with the ability and the strength to rescue ourselves if there were a fire or some problem after landing. So a lot of things, that happen in a short term. And then in terms of the longer exposure to spaceflight, you mentioned radiation, which is a real risk, especially if we think about going to Mars beyond our Earth's magnetic fields. We'd be susceptible to galactic cosmic radiation and solar flare activity. So your cancer risk is higher, and also cataract risk is higher because of radiation. So yeah, it's a wonderful life experience, but there are some health risks to astronauts. The other biggie is changes to our visual system. For our long duration astronauts, there's been a description of increased intracranial pressure that's changed the shape of the back of the eyeball. And so some of our long duration astronauts have had pretty significant visual shifts. And we don't have a countermeasure for that yet.
Yeah, I've been stealing all the questions, Kevin, but I had to ask.
No, that was super good. And as I was saying in the middle of this, I knew man, we could talk about a lot of things. And I also know that you have an important date after this, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But would you just talk about the space stuff for so long, but can you tell us what you're doing now? So when you transitioned out of NASA, where did you go next, and how is your life now?
Yeah, let me see if I can find a prop. There we go. So I am an entrepreneur. I'm an inventor, kind of a serial product developer. And one of the things that I really understood from being in space is motion through 3 dimensions. And when we're in space, we think about 6 degrees of freedom of motion. So it's not just the position or XYZ in a coordinate frame, but also the pitch, roll, and yaw of a point of reference, whether it's the tip of a robotic arm or the nose of the space shuttle or an aircraft, or think about surgical robotics. I don't know if you have a lot of experience using a Da Vinci surgical robot, but it's a task that requires a lot of training, and unless you do it on a regular basis, your proficiency drops off very readily. And so as I came back to Earth, I retired from NASA. I was working as a chief technology officer at a research institute when I developed the core intellectual property for my company called Fluidity Technologies. And this is our first generation product, and it's a very intuitive way to move a drone through physical space. And ultimately, we think our technology will empower surgical robotics as well. But you're really trying to make flight a subconscious task. So a pilot or a surgeon can focus out at what's happening at the tip of the catheter or the laparoscope, rather than how am I physically going to get it there. Reducing the operator workload to get the most out of that experience. And so ultimately, we think our technology will allow for us to teleoperate a surgical procedure in sub-Saharan Africa from here in Houston. So to have tactile feedback, but also great sense of when you're making an input and when you're not. And so there's a lot of secret sauce behind all this stuff, but suffice it to say, it's a really fun way to fly a drone. It makes it a lot easier. You can, within a few minutes of instruction, get out and fly perfect figure eights and inward facing ascending spirals that would take hundreds of hours to master with traditional controls. So it's kind of a cool quantum leap in capability.
Yeah. If somebody wanted to, oh, sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
That makes me excited because that there's so many cool potentials with that. Not only the robotic surgery, because where I trained, there was a lot of robotic surgery, and I remember the surgeons complaining about the difficulty with it with adjusting the arm. I mean, we did a lot of early Da Vinci stuff, so that's super exciting when you can actually have a patient in sub-Saharan Africa, and then you have access to the best specialists anywhere in the world. And then my son's a gamer, so obviously as soon as you talked about that, I'm like, oh, man, it just sounds fantastic. I'll stop geeking out here.
No, that's fine. I was just curious if people wanted to either integrate that type of technology into whether it's medical field or something else that's unique or creative, where would they be able to reach
out to us? Yeah, so we're at fluidity.tech, FLUIDITY.tech. And please come check us out. And we really are a platform for mobility. Anything that moves through a 3-dimensional physical or virtual space. So, to include augmented and virtual reality, gaming that you mentioned, flight simulation, surgical simulation. Think about, 3D reconstructions of patients using CT and MRI. Imagine being able to virtually fly through a virtual patient. Those kinds of far out concepts, we think we could make a whole lot better. So,
yeah. Awesome.
Cool.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I was
Any other
gonna say,
last questions?
Super cool. No, I don't have any more. I know we're running out of time here, but we have to have you back on because I'd love to hear about your entrepreneurial experiences and creative outlet, like how you put this stuff together. So
that would be fun. No, I'd welcome it, and I've really enjoyed the conversation here with you guys today. So thanks so much for inviting me. Yeah,
and it's pretty amazing. We have such an awesome physician, went from white coat to white suit to now, virtual flight with these really cool inventions. So, thank you again for joining us. And for those listening to the Change Physician podcast, I'm Dr. Melissa Cady with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And see you next time.